If you like any Dark Souls game, Bloodborne, or even Sekiro, you really should give a look to the Nioh games. Specifically, right now we're going to be talking about Nioh 2. It's an action role-playing game in the Souls-Borne kind of formula. Not entirely, but we'll get into that. It's developed by Team Ninja and Ko Shibusawa, and is set in the feudal Japan Sengoku era. Now, the game was released in March of 2020, so why am I talking about it now in 2021? Well, I recently picked it up for the PlayStation 5. There was a Nioh remastered collection which included Nioh 1, Nioh 2, and all DLC for both games. It allows the game to run in 4K 60 FPS, or if you have a monitor that can handle it, 120 FPS, which is pretty astounding. I picked up this collection having only played and completed Nioh 1 and all of its DLC, so I thought why not just pick up the collection for the PS5? It has literally everything on it. And this video is supposed to be for people out there that perhaps have played, Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, perhaps the new Demon Souls, perhaps Bloodborne, perhaps even Sekiro, and have just never heard of this game or never thought to try it out and have just stayed away from it. I know people that are really interested in it but have heard that it's a lot like a Souls game, so they're not quite sure if they want to play it. But I'm just making this somewhat short video just to kind of show people what the game's about and just to say how much fun I'm having with it. And if you're on the fence about giving it a try, I would really recommend that you do. Before I go into what's good and what's not so good about Nioh 2, I just want to remind people that I'm trying to reach 100 subscribers. I'm getting pretty close. I think we're about halfway there. It's my new target, my new goal. So if you're watching this video and you're not yet subscribed, please do consider subscribing. If you're not sure, maybe go back and check through my channel, see if there's anything there that you enjoy. And if you do, a subscription would be greatly appreciated. But with that said, let's move on to the positives of Nioh 2. So I guess the first thing that's really important to say is that it is very much like a Souls-Borne style game. However, it does differ in a lot of different ways. In fact, I've even seen some Nioh fans try to distance themselves from the Souls-Borne comparison, which I don't think is necessarily a good idea. I'm kind of on the side that being a Souls-Borne game and having the influence from the games from Software is definitely a positive thing here, and this game probably would never have been made were it not for the Souls games being as popular and as incredibly good as they are. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that Nioh in early development was actually meant to be a Dynasty Warriors or Samurai Warriors style game, a Musou hack and slash style game originally, which I'm sort of glad that it wasn't. Those games have their places and I actually really enjoy those games, but this game is something altogether much more complex, much more interesting, and just such a great thing to play. Story-wise, I won't ruin any of the things that happen or the characters that you meet, but let's just say if you've ever played any of the Samurai Warriors games or you have any knowledge of the Sengoku era of Japan, with characters, I say characters, they're real people, like Nobunaga or Hanzo Hattori and people like that, this game's probably got you covered there. You'll probably understand who these people are, most of the time at least. There are some that I wasn't aware of who are historical figures, important historical figures I should say, but a lot of them I already knew from other games, but it was interesting to see how they weaved it into the story. What I will say is it does that sort of interesting thing that Assassin's Creed does, where they try to say that things that happened in history, in real history, happened because of, interference by Templars or Assassins. It's sort of like that here. They're saying that these, warlords and daimyos and different warriors from this era of Japan took over these certain regions and did these things due to some of the actions of the protagonist in the game that you play as, and because of, story implications. Again, I don't want to spoil anything, but if you're into that sort of thing, I think you'll really enjoy the story that this game has to offer. Visually, I think the game looks absolutely stunning, especially running in 4K 60 FPS. It runs so incredibly smoothly, the gameplay is really great, and it's just a real joy to look at, especially a lot of the monster designs and the environments that you traverse, just really nice all round. As I say, gameplay wise, it runs really, really smoothly. It's got that sort of standard, health bar and stamina bar. In this game, the stamina is called ki, and you use it to dodge, to roll, to run, to do attacks. Heavy attacks take more ki, that sort of thing. Pretty standard fare for anyone who has played a Souls game before. However, this game layers new things on top of it with a lot of skill customization, combo customization, and even things like a ki pulse. So what that is when you end a combo, you'll see a little flash of blue light around your character. When that happens, if you tap a certain button, you'll perform a ki pulse. What that does is allow you to recover your ki a lot faster than just, waiting for it to happen naturally. It also dispels yokai realms that have been put on the floor that impede stamina recovery or ki recovery in this game. So it's got multiple uses, and it's just a really interesting system, and it keeps you engaged in combat constantly. There's no real downtime in combat, I find. You can learn a lot of different ninjutsu and omnio magic, things like buffing weapons, throwing shurikens, all sorts of different things that you can get. There's massive skill trees, tons of different weapons, tons of different sets of armor, a massive amount of story missions, side missions, duels against other characters, and full-on co-op for almost every mission in the game from the beginning. It really does literally have everything that I want in a Souls-type game. And of course, there is far more to the game than I'm even explaining right now, and the reason I'm not going into massive detail is because I don't want this video to be an hour long. I just want to give you the main important points to see if you may consider picking up this game or not. And of course, with that in mind, I should tell you about the negatives. And these are probably more of a personal thing per player, I would think. But for me, in Dark Souls, when you dodge out of the way of an enemy's attack, and your reward for having that skill to have dodged the attack is to then wail on the opponent until you kill them or you run out of stamina, and then you have to retreat, right? Well, in this game, the enemies mostly have what's known as hyper armor, where they won't flinch when you hit them, and you probably see this in the background gameplay. There's a lot of time where you'll hit an enemy and they just won't budge. They won't even act like they've been hit, and they can basically poise through, and Dark Souls players will understand what that means. They will be able to just poise through all your attacks and hit you, and they hit you hard. So the idea is that you're supposed to break their ki or their stamina bar. So the idea is you keep hitting them, and you'll see two bars with an enemy, the health bar and the ki bar. If you can deplete the ki bar, which they will lose from attacking you or being deflected off of your block, but if you can deplete it, it will stun them for a little while, and you'll be able to hit them and they will flinch. You can also sometimes do a critical attack, which is a bit like a riposte or a backstab. And of course, you might be thinking that this sounds like a pretty decent system, but the issue you'll run into, or at least I do, is that breaking the opponent's ki, unless you're really spec'd for it, is actually quite a difficult thing, and some enemies just feel like they will never have their ki broken because of the regeneration that they have. So that can sometimes feel a little bit unfair, especially if you have two enemies that both hit really hard, are really big, and you've got to try and deal with both of them at the same time. It will feel a little bit overwhelming, especially because none of them will flinch when you fight back. It can be a little overwhelming, and I think that's the biggest issue with Nioh 2. Especially in the beginning, it feels, this might be a little unfair, this might be a little bit of a blasphemous thing to say, but I think the game feels literally unfair in the first few stages, but you really have to push through and get through the first area. Once you're through the first stuff, you'll find that it does get easier as you get used to the way the game works and all the little nuances. I mentioned earlier that you can do things like a ki pulse. There's even different stances for weapons. So as an example, I'm using an odachi on my main character, which is a large katana, a double-handed, sort of like greatsword almost. And you can go into low stance, mid stance, or high stance. So low stance is quicker and does less damage, mid is sort of a mid-range, and high stance is basically slower, harder hitting attacks. And some really good players can switch between these stances while doing a ki pulse while in combat. And I've got to say, that's not something I can do. I tend to find a stance that works for me and I stick to it, which is, what a lot of people do, but it can, in the beginning, feel very, very overwhelming with the amount of information and the amount of options that you have. But I would just advise just going into it and saying to yourself, look, if I die, I die. It doesn't matter, I'm learning. And you use the first level just to learn how things work. I think you'll be really surprised when you realize how deep this game is and how good the combat really is. But that's really my only negative. I just think that the game can sometimes feel unfair, especially in the early stages. I don't think it is unfair, it just feels a little bit overwhelming. And stick with it, and I promise that you will get somewhere. You have to sort of play by this game's rules. You can't use your Dark Souls mindset, but the game is very similar. You just have to sort of bend what you're willing to do in the game. While they use a lot of the same mechanics and a lot of the same style of gameplay, you know, with shortcuts that you open to get further in the level and checkpoints, and if you die you lose your quote souls and then you have to pick them back up, you know, from a gravestone or a bloodstain or whatever the case may be. You do have to learn what the game is trying to teach you. So I think it's safe to say that if you are a Souls-Borne veteran, I think that you'll be able to come into this and transfer some of your skills into this game, but you have to remind yourself that this game wants you to play by a different set of rules within that skill set. So being able to dodge quickly is good, being able to block things is great. You'll find that parrying is harder in this game, much harder than Dark Souls or Demon Souls or any of those sort of games. You'll also find that dodging away from things and trying to use iframes to get away from certain attacks is not always as good as just simply guarding. In this game you can guard with literally any weapon and you don't lose any damage from guarding, you know, with any weapon in the game. It just flat out stops. Of course, if they break your ki or your stamina while this is happening, then you're rendered kind of useless for a few seconds, but the idea is if you've got good stamina management, you can usually guard most things, or, you know, you can play as a light, nimble ninja type character and you can dodge a lot more, you know, it just depends on how you do it, but you can bring your skill set over. Just remember that the game's going to ask you to do things that aren't natural to you if you're a Souls player. But once you sort of integrate them into your Souls gameplay, I think you'll find that it's a really interesting game and I think you'll have a really good time with it. So let me know if you're somebody who already plays the Nioh games. I'd like to hear from you, see what you think about them. And if you've never played a Nioh game, chat to me in the comments down below. I'm happy to answer any questions. I've basically finished everything there is to do in virtually all of Nioh. And as I said earlier, trying to get to 100 subscribers next. That's my next target. And if you enjoy the content and want to help me get there, please do subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. But with all that said, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.